know that sustainability was this buzzword, kind of this untouchable word that we heard and it was dropped here and there. But now it's increasingly becoming part of corporate social responsibility for all industries. And it's part of good governance. And honestly, at this point, it can't be ignored. And if you're ignoring it, you're not doing a good job. So sport can also lead the way in changing the rules of the game and ensuring a more sustainable world and future for the next generation. So with that, our next panel, Sustain the Game, Changing the Rules, is going to be moderated by Neil Cole, Director, Sectors Development, Food, Retail, and Supply Chain, BSI Group. Thank you for joining us. We also have Sam Coghill, Head of Operations, Hard Rock and Miami Dolphins. Emily Hofer, Chief People Officer and Head of Social Impact and Sustainability, World Surf League. Christine Burke, SVP, Strategic Partnerships and Runner Products, New York Roadrunners. And finally, Cindy Kramert, Executive Director, Stadium Planning and Special Projects, New York Yankees. So Neil, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So to kick things off, I'd like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves and give us a brief introduction of how they got into their role, and then I'd like to ask to also talk about what sustainability means to you. So Sam, if I could hand over to you.
Sure, thanks Neil. First of all, I'm so happy to be here today. It's been a really inspiring day and just very grateful to hear from all of the incredible panelists that we've had in the room. I've worked in professional sports for over 20 years for a multitude of different professional sports teams. My background is actually in corporate partnerships and spent about 15 plus years in corporate partnerships before moving into a human resources role with the Miami Dolphins, where I was fortunate enough to lead human resources for the Dolphins for 3 years, and have recently moved into stadium ops and have been there for the last 2+ years, right after Super Bowl of 2020. And sustainability for us is really a team game. It comes from every corner of our organization, and I'm fortunate to be in a position where I get to work with so many different stakeholders within our organization on sustainability and the goals that we need to achieve.
Very cool. Well, I also want to thank you for having me here. This has been such an inspiring day. Emily Hofer, Chief People Officer and Head of Social Impact and Environmental Impact at the World Surf League. My background is human resources, so I've been doing HR for 25 years, and about 2 years ago was invited in to lead our purpose work for the WSL, which I have to admit was a bit intimidating because I didn't grow up learning about environmental issues and initiatives, and certainly it's a important mantle to carry around leading equality, inclusion, equity, and diversity for the Surf League. But I've been loving it. It's the most fulfilling work I've ever done. Also the hardest work I've ever done. Sustainability to me and to the World Surf League it's a holistic, multidimensional thing. For us, it's about certainly our obligations around ocean conservation, as the ocean is our stadium in professional surfing, but it's also about how we're teaching our fans, teaching our athletes to care more than they did yesterday about sustainability, and it's also the pieces around the social impact, our work with indigenous communities, our work with grassroots communities, and the work we're doing in equality, which we're really proud of. So with that, I think that's enough.
Thank you. So I am Christine Burke. I'm the SVP of Strategic Partnerships and Runner Products for New York Roadrunners. New York Roadrunners is the largest community running organization in the world, probably most well known for the TCS New York City Marathon, which celebrated its 50th anniversary this past year. But we are a year-round organization. And so at New York Roadrunners, the sustainability area actually lives not in my department, but it will speak to why I'm here. It lives in an area called DEIS. And so as some of the earlier panelists today talked about the acronyms of adding a J and adding an A, we actually have an S in our organization, which stands for social responsibility. And that's where sustainability lives for us. And so similar to the World Surf League, we do not own our venues. And so it's really important to New York Roadrunners that we are good neighbors and good in our community and don't leave a footprint. So we bring health and wellness to the New York City area, but we don't want to leave a mess when we leave. And so we are focused on having the smallest possible footprint at our races. And we work with many of our partners to focus on that and to improve our sustainability efforts. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
My name is Cindy Camrat. I am with the New York Yankees. I've been fortunate to be in this industry over 33 years, so go way back. I've worked for some mostly professional sports teams my entire career. Started out in HR, really morphed into operations probably within the first 5 years of my career. I wear 2 different hats. I've been an owner's rep and worked and was proud to open up over 15 different stadiums around the country and work in that role as well as an operations role. So with the New York Yankees, I kind of wear both of those hats. I started with the organization as a consultant, as an owner's rep when we were building the new sports facility. They were fortunate to then hire me on afterwards as a consultant and then hired me on around 10 years ago. In a full-time role as I oversee all of our capital projects. Fortunate in the last, this is pre-pandemic, but we spent over $50 million of projects. You open up a facility and it's just not right. So obviously we've made modifications. So I oversee that as well as our non-baseball world. So and they kind of really work hand in hand together. Sustainability falls under stadium operations. So I'm proud to be part of a team with the New York Yankees that take sustainability to the highest level, and that initiative since 15 years ago, even before when we opened up new Yankee Stadium, it was part of our initiative and plan in driving and opening up the new facility. So it's been a strong initiative of ours throughout. We're the only North American team that has a consultant, Alan Hershowitz, I'm sure many of you know in this room from a sustainability effort. So he's always on every single phone call, so I learned so much from him and proud to be part of that. But I look forward to this conversation as well. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So as we heard at the start, the topic of sustainability has gone from being a buzzword to an expectation from stakeholders, communities around the world. And I think it's important to highlight that the sporting industry has got a lot to be proud of. There's a lot of really good things to celebrate and acknowledge. One of them would be the fact that there is an international standard that's used by organisations for sustainable events. That originates from the sports industry, from the Olympics in 2012, and it was most recently used at COP26. So there's a lot of really good things that we know has already started and taken shape from the sports industry. My question to the panel is, in your career and any successes that you'd like to share, what's your proudest moment?
Yeah, if I could start. In 2019, our CEO and Vice Chair, Tom Garfinkel, challenged our leadership team to eliminate all single-use plastic at the stadium. He said, we're going to have Super Bowl in 2020. How do we make a statement? We're stewards of this community. We're the Miami Dolphins. How do we think about what the oceans look like and single-use plastic and the impact that makes? So in about April of 2019, we sat in a room and figured out a way with our partner at Centerplate, Sodexo Live, and other stakeholders with corporate partnerships. How do we eliminate 2.7 million pieces annually of single-use plastics? And we are really proud to announce that we were able to achieve that. 99.4% of all single-use plastics were eliminated by Super Bowl 2020. We have no plastic cups in the stadium. We have all aluminum bottles for water. We have aluminum cups that are reusable. And we took a look at all the products that we were selling and made some hard decisions. There were some people who, had some fan favorite products that we were selling on the concession side. They're like, what happened to my lemonade, my frozen lemonade? We're like, in the plastic cup, right? It had to go. But that's something that really kind of helped us, on our way to becoming we're very proud of the work that we did, eliminating all the single-use plastic at the stadium.
Thank you.
Very cool. Similar in 2019, we went single-use plastic-free for all of our championship tour events, which is our world tour. And we also went carbon neutral for all of our championship tour events, our office operations and our 5 regional offices, and our big wave tour. So those are the 2 sort of big achievements recently. And now we're leading fan-facing initiative called We Are One Ocean. And in September of this past year, we delivered a petition to the United Nations calling for the protection of 30% of the world's ocean. And we had 150 countries and about 40 million people on the petition. So it was really, really cool to be able to lead that.
So I would say at New York Roadrunners, our proudest moments are probably still to come. That being said, there's a lot to be proud of over the last 10 years. So back in 2012, which actually turned into 2013, but that's a different story, we partnered with Goodwill of New York and New Jersey to collect discarded clothing at the start line of the marathon. And we've been doing that ever since. And in 2019, we surpassed 1 million pounds of discarded clothing that we've been able to collect. And so I think that is something that started a long time ago. It's something that we're very proud of, and something that we're actually talking about. How do you then create a cycle with that clothing? Do we bring it back to the expo the next year and sell it and fundraise, as opposed to it sort of entering the Goodwill stream? So there's lots of opportunities, but that's one example. I would say another example is at this year's marathon, if you can imagine how much fluid and hydration runners need when they're running, right? We have 23 water stations, a few fewer this year, but along the course that distribute water and Gatorade. And that's a lot of cups. If every runner takes 1 cup at every water station, you do the math. It's a lot. 50,000 runners, it's a lot of cups. We composted all of those cups this year. And that is something that we're really proud about. And there's a lot of focus on sort of the waste that's created and what are we doing with it at the end of the race. So those are 2 examples that we're proud of.
Thank you.
That's great. I would say our lighting, when we opened up, and I referenced it earlier, we were thinking about sustainability prior to opening up the facility, but when we opened up, we had the highest efficiency of sports lighting in the industry at that point. And at that point, we were 33% below efficiency from the old stadium. As an organization, we were always striving to do better, and so a company, Plan LED, out of Korea, the Seattle Mariners, give them props. They did the first sports lighting. It's human-centric lighting. We did a lot of ROI and analysis and made the determination, even though they were not at warranty or out of functionality, it made sense for us to replace those lightings, the field lighting on top of the stadium, and save another 33%. So what that morphed into is probably my personal proudest moment as the sustainability effort is working with the group well. So it took us 3 years, but we were the first stadium to get the WELL building standard. And part of that was due to the lighting. So we changed out our entire locker rooms, all of our artist space with the sports lighting. So again, it's human-centric. It's kind of to mimic the daylight and evening. So we were able to accomplish that just before COVID. We had GBCI in, honestly, on March 11th. And then everything shut down on March 13th. But we were able to successfully achieve that award. And then, like Sam did during the COVID, the health and safety rating came in, and Sam was one of the first ones as an organization that also received that rating through the WELL organization. So personally, I've developed into becoming a WELL associate, and just very, very proud of that. So.
Brilliant. Thank you. So as we said, the topic of sustainability is obviously very important. We know why it's important. But looking at the broader sports industry, what do you feel are the most pressing issues that the sports industry is facing today from a sustainability perspective?
I think from my perspective, it's resources. It was not inexpensive to make the switch and move away from single-use plastic. So you need to have buy-in from the top saying, like, this is important to us. This is why we're going to do this. And know that there is going to be a cost to making those changes. And I'm not sure that every sports organization has those resources to be able to pour into making those wholesale changes.
I agree with that. I think leadership and having sort of buy-in at the very top is critical, because they are not, most of these moves are not inexpensive. They ultimately, I believe, pay off in terms of other way, through sponsorship and through other accolades that you can earn, like the awards that you've received. And but they are expensive, and yeah, I think it isn't yet urgent enough for people to understand that the investment is sort of essential for the future.
Yeah, I would say that the quality of the experience needs to not decrease. The example of the frozen lemonade, right? You don't want to give up your frozen lemonade. I think when you see the car industry or the automobile industry is a good example of that. Electronic cars have been around for a while, but until they were perfected or improved significantly, people didn't buy into them. But we've reached a tipping point in the last 5 years where actually the quality is there. And so I think that we're doing work with recycled materials for our participant shirts, for example. So long as the quality is there, runners will be happy and they will buy into the story of why we're using recycled materials for those shirts. And so I think that reaching a point where the quality and the experience isn't sacrificed is the biggest challenge that we're facing right now.
Yeah, I think for ours it's construction, and Neil and I spoke about that earlier. I mean, with the amount of projects that we do, it's and a number of contractors that we have is getting that buy-in and that support to also be sustainable. Emissions and products and recycling. We effort very strongly in that, but that's probably one of our biggest challenges is to get that wider buy-in as we proceed through this. But I agree with the panel. I think it's becoming more and more part of the language, which is great because that further supports us in our initiative and our goals across the industry and across the company.
I just want to add one other thing that occurs to me, and I think it's come up a few times today, that creating a culture where it's expected inside the company, where it's everyone's job to live sustainability is also the challenge, but also the reward, because then it becomes more important because everyone's expecting it, everyone's thinking that way, everyone's making decisions, they're innovating in that direction. And so I think the other challenge is just making sure that culturally it's being driven from every part of the business.
Good point. So focusing on culture, I mean, as female leaders, what kind of challenges have you faced within your organisations to help your organisation and your leadership and the culture within the organisation embrace sustainability and affecting positive change? And how have you overcome that?
Yeah, I'm not sure at New York Roadrunners if it's been something to overcome. We're really fortunate in that our board of directors, our leadership team have embraced this for many years. I think the biggest challenge is for it, remembering it for it to be a part of the conversation from the beginning. So, in our conversations in my roles with partners, for example, we're really intentional now about talking to partners about what are their sustainability priorities and how can we be integrated into them. And so I think there's an intentionality that is the biggest challenge is sort of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation that we had earlier with that panel is having diversity and equity be a part of the conversation from the beginning and not trying to retrofit. I think it's really similar with sustainability.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, I would say that same thing culturally, even not in our front office, but with the fans. We have 52,000 fans that, we do the green initiatives and the pickup of the cups and try to be out there in the seating bowl to see what we're doing to hopefully, connect with them personally in their drive and initiative. And from an office standpoint, and even our front office, we're so diverse and so widespread out. We just don't have one collective offices. We're over 8 different offices. So I think it's difficult to get that message completely through. We're going through an initiative now that with Con Ed, looking at all of our lighting and really getting more LED driven and occupancy sensors, which we don't have, and we will need to have that in a few years anyway. But I think that's even going to drive it more. I mean, how many times they leave their office and they don't shut the light off. So this is going to drive that home even more, that again, it should be first and foremost into their perspective of making sure that we're leaving this, this place a better place, and we're driving home the sustainability efforts across the board.
I would say in the last couple of years, where I've been focused culturally is inspiring people to want to do the work inspiring people to care a little bit more. I don't expect you to become a conservationist. I don't need you to be an activist, but I do need you to make that incremental change. And what I talk to my team about all the time is we're doing fan-facing. We have our own WSL Pure as our Instagram for our work. What can we do to inspire someone to say, oh, I could do that too. It's not that big of a move. Because, as a person who wasn't an environmental activist until this role, it always felt so big and so hard and so, like it's not something I'm trained to know how to fix. And so incremental, I think, cultural change is what we're trying to do with both with the fan facing and then obviously inside with the athletes and with our staff.
Good point.
Yeah, our organization has a lot of young people, which is great because you get energy and you have ideas that come from them. And so one of my favorite pieces about the cultural shift that I've seen in our organization over the last 6 years that I've been there is how many people care about it. And they're talking about different ideas and how we can improve day to day, even down to like a employee's idea, like we have dry cleaning that comes in and out of the office. We actually changed our process, so we actually turn our dry cleaning in a bag and it returns to us in a bag that just covers it instead of having plastic. So that was all part of an idea that came from someone else as we're looking to eliminate single-use plastic. Someone goes, what about that? Like there's plastic over your dry cleaning, and so there's just little things that we've done, and those ideas come from inside. So I don't think there's been as many challenges as there is opportunity to continue to get better because people continue to come up with ideas that, we can make those incremental changes at the organization.
That's a really good point. I would say from today's discussions, the one word, well, there's many words I've heard, but the one that really landed with me is change. That needs to be change. And we always find that working with organisations in different industry sectors, the sporting industry has got a unique position because you're embracing more inclusive, more diverse leadership structures that other industries can benefit from. There is a very famous saying from an American academic called W. Edwards Deming, who created the continuous improvement cycle of the, plan, do, check, act, and it's change is not necessary because survival is not mandatory. What lessons do you think other industry sectors could learn from the great work that's been done to date and continues to evolve from the sporting industry?
I think we just have such a big platform. And that's something that if we're not using the platform appropriately to say, like, we have this global brand of the Miami Dolphins at Hard Rock Stadium. We're host to these incredible global events. We have the Miami Open tennis tournament that we'll be hosting starting next week. We have our inaugural F1 race that will be in May. If we're not using a platform to say, here's the change that we can make, and we're looking at our partner brand saying, how do we advance your efforts to get to a more sustainable place, I think we're doing a disservice because if we don't have a platform and we're not using our voice, I think it's a miss on our part, and we're out there with it.
No, good point.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, no, I think it's our responsibility, just like with the New York Yankees, as Sam is. I mean, it's our responsibility to lead that effort, or at least contribute to that efforting. A perfect example is, when we have a game, you have 4 hours of peak demand energy use that's higher than any other place. So, I mean, sure, we can just go forward and just pay that bill, but we know it's not about the money, it's about the energy use. So we are working feverishly and working very, very hard to try to figure out ways to reduce that peak demand. And, we talk about solar and we talk about wind, but those percentages are so small. Collectively, it's a great platform for it, but right now we're moving forward in the Con Ed industry and working hand in hand with them and trying to figure out ways to change the ability, spend money, but the ROI is so much greater in that reduction of peak demand that goes beyond our walls. So that's so important to us as a global name, if you will. If we can at least show that we're making an effort to change and be responsible and socially responsible is extremely important to us in our ownership.
I think it's not only the right thing to do, but it's essential for business survival. I think younger consumers and fans are going to expect it. They're not going to want to do business with corporations that are interested in these things because they get to inherit the earth that we hand them. And so they're much more interested in what organizations are doing and who has an authentic high integrity approach to the mission and the purpose work versus those who are doing it. I think you and I talked about it just because, it seems like a good marketing initiative, and they can tell the difference. It's really interesting. And as a matter of fact, with our We Are One Ocean petition that we ran last year, every sort of commercial we created, video content, we were really proud of. Nobody watched it. But if an athlete got on camera, literally nobody watched it. And I was so proud of them. Spent a lot of money on them. But if I could get an athlete on camera and say, I want you to care about this petition numbers grew, and I got more views. They want the organic and authentic connection. They don't want anything polished or too sophisticated. It doesn't feel real.
That's a great point. I think everyone on this stage, all of our properties have brand equity and brand value, right? And when we speak, people listen, and so there's a responsibility in that. And so I think that having this be a priority for communication, whether it's in a press release or with the media, and talking about what we're doing, certainly the media will listen to the New York Yankees more than they would to nothing against a tech company, but a tech company, right? And what a tech company is doing. But if you talk about the Yankees and what the Yankees are doing, and their Dolphins or the World Surf League, there's real sort of tangible value in that. And those fans who are associated and align themselves with the brand, I think will listen more. And so I think there's a responsibility in that.
And as you said, the consumers are becoming more discerning. They're expecting more. They don't want to hear the words. They want to see the actions. They want objective evidence, which is obviously offered through what SIGA bring to the industry through the best practice and governance, which will include elements around sustainability. We've also seen that financial institutions as well are divesting from organisations that can't demonstrate that they're a good corporate citizen and good environmental steward. So as you say, change is coming. Conscious that two of the panelists have fixed infrastructure to use natural environments. You all have supply chains. You all have suppliers, very large, complex supply chains. How do you influence your suppliers in following what you're doing? For example, banning single-use plastics or using more sustainable practices, being more conscious of moving from today's linear economy where we take, make, use, dispose, pollute to one of tomorrow's circularity. What can you, as leaders in the industry, help your suppliers embrace more environmental and social best practices moving forward?
I can use an example of what we're doing with the Formula One race kind of coming up here in May. We are in the middle of an incredibly vibrant community of Miami Gardens. It's where our stadium is hosted. And we have local vendors that are going to be a huge part of the food and beverage operation for the F1 race. It's not strictly back on Sodexo, our concessionaire. We've gone out and we've talked to local food trucks and we've talked to local vendors that are part of the Miami Gardens community and saying, how do we make you an endemic part of this F1 race so when people come into this race, they understand what this community is all about. And we do a lot of local sourcing of our food through Sodexo. And so we are making those strides, but there's obviously a ton of work for us to be working on moving forward.
Thank
you. The supply chain disruption of the last 2 years has given us a great opportunity to think about things differently, right? We source finisher metals from China. Well, they wouldn't arrive in time. So where do we source them? And that's obviously all the shipment related to that is a much smaller footprint, environmental footprint. So I think that it's both working with vendors, but it's also thinking about what can we do that's more local? What can we do differently? Does every runner need a finisher medal? Like, can we sacrifice at some races where they don't have them? So I think that it's been a really great opportunity to think about things differently over the last few years.
Yeah, I think it definitely is one of our greatest challenges, especially on the construction side. I can look at our event side, where we too are working with the clients coming in for an event to try to be a more sustainability, more efforting for that. And then the supply chain side for construction, it's tough because you have engineering firms and construction firms that some are focused solely on that sustainability, but many are not. So it's constantly working through, we have 150 different contractors and vendors that, putting it into our master services agreement and putting it into our rules and regulations regulations and policies on how and what they do when they come on site. But it's a constant struggle, and I think that's probably our greatest challenge. One thing we are doing which we've been trying to do, is the efforting on plants and growing in our community. We have a healthy home plate program that we bring the community in, and they talk about, with our chef, they talk about healthy home and food and how to eat well at school or at home. We're actually in the process of building a tower garden, which we've never done. We've been trying to find a place for many, many years. So many other organizations have them, and they're great, and they support their table with the plants that they're growing. Ours will be a little bit smaller than like Boston's is huge, and it's amazing, but it's something that we're efforting, but we're bringing the kids in, and they'll learn about the healthy home plate, not only by what the chef says, but by watching it grow. So we're pretty proud of that. So that's one initiative of trying to kind of close that gap of some of the vendors and resources that we have.
One of the comments that was made earlier was the important role about sourcing sustainably. So making sure that we work with trusted partners that are transparent, open, good corporate citizens, celebrate best practice, and everything that we've been discussing at the event. What role do you feel the industry could lead with using best practice standards, using SIGA's frameworks, using some of these global standards, so that understand there's typically a standard for everything. They start with a number and start with some letters and then there's a number, but there are standards for sustainable procurement, environmental best practice, the circular economy. What role do you feel the sports industry could take moving forward from today's event to demonstrate to other industries and to the sports industry that these best practice frameworks can affect real change by helping everyone work to a harmonized framework? Did you feel that there's a role that standards have in achieving these changes that's expected from all industry sectors?
Yes, I do. At the World Surf League, we vet every partner who's going to be a sponsor for the World Surf League, and then if they want to sponsor for WSL Pure, which is our work around our 501(c)(3) with ocean conservation, there's a second level of vetting as it relates to the way they do their business. And whether or not they can be associated with our brand, we have a very high standard with that, because we think it's really important to walk the walk and not just take money from whoever is willing to offer. So we've had to say no to a few huge brands, but it's the right thing to do. And I think that, in the conversations, I've been in a couple of them, it's like, show me your journey. If you're on the journey, then we can support that part of the business. Jeep is one that we just did business with on their 4xe, their electric vehicle, but Jeep couldn't be associated with our ocean conservation project, for example. But if they're on the journey, we're willing to work with you, and we want to help you tell that story, we want to elevate that story, but we're not here to do greenwashing, is what I think. And so I think the more careful or the more deliberate or intentional we are with these kinds of decisions, the more it's going to cause businesses to make different decisions.
Yeah. So at New York Roadrunners, our organization and specifically our sustainability team feel very strongly that you can't improve something you can't measure. And so we've applied for admittance to two programs that are sustainability based. One is the UN Sport for Climate Action, and the other is the Council for Responsible Sport. And there are very clear standards on how you are measured for acceptance into both of those programs. And so we have been working with Waste Management and their sports and entertainment group to determine and measure our footprint over the last few years. It's a multi-year project to measure, and the standards and our KPIs will be set up against those measurements. And so I think this is a multi-year process, but it's really important, we think, to measure, to actually know the improvements that we are affecting.
No, very good.
I think that's really well said. Yeah, you have to start somewhere and understand what your baseline is, and then be able to grow from there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've seen some of the, as you pointed out, some of the pitfalls, if you will, where organisations are trying to make claims that aren't substantiated, or they don't have objective evidence, or they haven't kind of used a recognised framework, are typically called out for greenwashing. So it's very important that we recognise that. If we were looking back in 5, 10, whatever number of years, we've all got objectives for the future. If we were looking back at today's event at that point, what kind of changes would you expect to have seen in the industry by then?
I think in the industry as a whole, you're going to see more widespread adoption. I mean, you've got 4 people up here who are representing organizations that are starting to put their heart into these efforts, but there's many more to come.
Okay.
And there's a lot of stories that we don't know yet, that people are working on these efforts, and we're going to hear some incredible things that are coming out of sports and the work that is being done. But I think if you look back 5, 10 years, from now, I think we'll be amazed at how few we're doing it now compared to where we'll be.
Brilliant.
I would say that some of the things that we think are quite leading edge now will be the norm. And just like we learned with the pandemic, the urgency of trying to create solutions, I think the urgency is going to continue to ratchet up. And so we'll be even more innovative than we've ever been. And I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
I think that one of the great successes that we will have is how we leverage partnerships to affect this change. There are many partners that New York Roadrunners has, MasterCard being a really good example, that has an incredible priceless planet platform. And we play a very, very tiny, small role in leveraging that platform. But working with our partners and understanding the power of those partnerships to affect the change and improve the situation, I think, is more than we'd be able to do on our own.
Yeah, I definitely see it as more of a wide, it's going to be normal speak now. I think it's become more normal speak now. Everyone's talking about sustainability, and a few years ago, what is sustainability? What's the definition of sustainability? And it's different in so many different platforms. But I think it's just going to be part of that normal speak. I think our goal is to continue to show measurable adoptions of sustainability efforting and being that a global efforting on behalf of the Yankees, but the industry and just in general in society, because it completely affects health and mental awareness, and we saw that over the last few years. So I just think it's going to be normal. I think Sam kind of mentioned some of these that are these extraordinary unique ideas are just going to be the norm that's going to be adopted, and I'm excited for it. So for new buildings and new opportunities beyond just the construction of the sport, but also the events taking place at those locations.
That's brilliant. I share your excitement, by the way. Just conscious for time, are there any questions from our audience to the panelists at all? Anyone, any burning questions regarding sustainability? Oh, sorry. We'll get you the microphone afterwards.
Sorry,
Thank
I'm
you.
not comfortable with microphones. I work on the MasterCard side, the sponsorships team at MasterCard with Christine on what she was talking about with Priceless Planet Coalition. How do you see brands helping further this cause? Like, are there ways that sponsors can work with you better to advance that initiative, whether it's in an activation or something a bit more PR worthy? Like, how can we make more of an impact working with you all?
Yeah. So I would say that there are maybe 2 primary ways. One is financial, and the financial support to put behind those initiatives. And then the second is just the communication opportunity. There's a much broader reach if partners are working together with these properties and being able to amplify what is happening.
In my seat in stadium operations, I've been able to work very closely with our sponsorship team and our partnership team, and they've come to me and said, we have partners who are very invested in the environment and creating sustainable events. How can they help? And so those conversations start with, here are our goals. Here are some of the things that we are trying to achieve by 2025, 2030. We're fortunate in the fact that we host a lot of global events outside of Miami Dolphins football and Miami Hurricanes football. Miami Open Tennis and now Formula One, looking at FIFA World Cup and hopefully Rugby World Cup as well. But those organizations all have goals that are in mind for their events. So we benchmark and say, okay, by 2031, this is where we know we need to be. So as we start talking to partners, we start formulating what that strategy looks like and how do we get there. So I think there's great conversations to be had about what's important to the brand and also what's important to the property and how they can work together on achieving all of those goals.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We do specific partnership meetings to evaluate the brand's goals, and then we sometimes even customize packages for what the brand really cares about. And so it usually looks like an activation with fans involved, and we create branded content around it so that it can live beyond that particular day. And we host it either on our platform, our digital platform, worldsurfleague.com, or through Pure. So we have a lot of different ways, but we think that the opportunity to partner with brands is the way forward between leveraging the voices of our athletes and the brands, and sometimes the brands bring amazing influencers with them to our activations, that it multiplies the messaging. And it's less about the brand of WSL or the brand that is partnering, it's more about the thing we're doing, and then the fans like, that's really cool, I want to be part of something like that. I want to be associated, I want to be part of that community that cares about that. And then there's all the sort of halo effect. That's what we believe is really the power of this.
Yeah, from our standpoint, I mean, we need our partners, and our partners are our partners, not just, I mean, it's so important and critical that we're messaging the same. And MasterCard, you guys are one of our amazing partners in everything that we've been able to do at the ballpark. But I think that messaging is not just the Yankees, and when it's not just the Yankees, and it's a brand like MasterCard, a brand from Action Carding that, hey, recycle that cup and put a sticker on that garbage can is huge. So they see the Yankee brand everywhere, you know. I mean, at the ballpark they can see the Yankees, but if it's the Yankees with another brand, they'll stop and see it, versus just kind of coasting over it as another Yankee logo that's on some pillar or some garbage can. So I think it's very critical and important and a way forward, I think, to continue the sustainability effort.
Question just around, you were saying, you added an athlete to your commercial and then it gave it a little more credibility. For some of the other leagues that maybe aren't the surf league, where it feels to me like a surfer may be a natural fit for that messaging, maybe in baseball or football, have you seen any success stories with athletes getting involved in this messaging? Because I think at M&T Bank, we struggle sometimes to incorporate a player to speak to, say, our mission around, being in communities and getting communities what they need. It comes off as not authentic if the player doesn't believe in it. So have you guys had any success stories in maybe a less obvious sport? Because I agree, usually when you add the player, the attention is there, but I think people can also sniff out when it's not authentic, and this is a topic that you can't fake, right? A brand can't fake it, and an athlete can't fake it. So have there been success stories? Do those players seem to present themselves often enough, or is it the kind of thing where, like, if it happens, it happens, but that's not our focus?
So I can speak just a really quick in the next player, but Mariano Rivera is one of our, obviously, most elite player, Hall of Fame thing. So when we brought in Planet LED, which again is the human-centric lighting, he took such passion in that project that and now there's community involvement. So they go into schools and they improve the lighting, which improves the school, improves the mental acuity of those students. So he's so passionate about this. He's actually part of the Plan LED now. So within Bronx, we're the 4th congressional district in New York, he's gone into all the communities and all these schools and placed and installed all these lightings, again, because it's a true passion project for him. And it's not only the savings and the efficiency, but it truly is the mental acuity and the betterment for that child, betterment of that adult in an office workplace. But if you go on to LinkedIn, he's got his own LinkedIn and tied to this Plan LED because of his passion project, truly. And I think it has made a difference, obviously.
It really has to start with the athlete. I think that Mariano Rivera is a great example. Another one in the running world is Dina Castor, who until about a month ago was the American record holder in the marathon for the last 5 or 10 years. And she feels very strongly about sustainability. She's on her in Mammoth Lakes, California, where she resides. She's on the community council around sustainability, and we learned of that and wanted to tap into it. And so our partner TCS has a sustainability contest for youth called Go IT, and we invited her to be one of the judges on the panel for that sustainability IT challenge, right? And so it was a sort of an awkward fit, but became a really natural fit because it was something that she was passionate about, but it had to start with her. We couldn't have picked any professional runner off the street to say, come sit on this panel and be a judge. Because she had that personal passion, it really was a good fit.
And I think what Emily said, it has to be authentic. So, and to the way you asked your question is perfectly said. It'll show through if they're not authentic and they're not backing that initiative, for sure.
One of the things I've been working on in the purpose space is actually talking to the athletes and interviewing them about the things they care about. And I was talking about this earlier. One of the younger athletes mostly are like, I don't know. What should I care about? And so exposing them to activations and helping them figure out what they care about, because it has to be authentic. And then if, for example, in sustainability space, we have Climate Council who will give them media training so that they won't embarrass themselves if they're asked to get on camera and speak about it, because we want them to present their best self on behalf, because it grows their brand and dimensionalizes them as an athlete. And then, oh, by the way, it helps all of the initiatives be more successful. So I think it can be a journey. It doesn't have to be like, nope, nobody's interested. I think we actually need to help them understand that it's safe to have a voice in other spaces other than just being an athlete.
I've just been told that we've come to the end of our time. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists and thank the team at Seagull for the opportunity to be here today. And I'll hand back to you, Kim. Thank you.
You guys are good to go. Yeah, there's a great saying that we didn't inherit the land from our parents, we're borrowing it from our children. And I think in the future, longevity will ultimately be determined by the industries that can demonstrate sustainability. So it's exciting to see sports kind of leading the way in ways to execute sustainability and doing it creatively as well. So thank you guys for your time. We appreciate it. So if we kind of rewind back and reflect back on our very first panel of the day, the one with Ann, Chris, Courtney, and Mary, it was pretty evident that women's sports are the most popular that they've ever been. There's a hunger for them, yet there's this disparity between men's and women's games in terms of revenue, in terms of airtime, media coverage.